Most revenge stories make one promise. They tell you that if the hero just suffers enough, fights hard enough, and finally kills the person who ruined their life, everything will click into place. The pain will mean something. The anger will finally go quiet. The story will feel complete. Vinland Saga looks at that idea and basically says, yeah, no, that's not how trauma works. And that's exactly why this anime hits so hard. Because at first, Vinland Saga tricks you. It shows you Vikings, war, blood, duels, political chaos, and one angry little gremlin of a child named Thorfinn who wants revenge more than oxygen. And you think you know where this is going. You think this is going to be a story about a boy becoming stronger, killing the villain, and proving himself in one glorious, emotional payoff. But Vinland Saga is way smarter than that. And honestly, way crueler. Because this isn't really a story about revenge. It's a story about what revenge does to a person. How violence hollows people out. How hatred can become your identity. And what happens when the one thing keeping you alive disappears. And when this anime finally reveals what it's really about, man, it hits like a punch straight to the soul. So in this video, I want to break down why Vinland Saga is one of the most powerful anime ever made. Not just because of the animation, not just because Askeladd is one of the greatest characters in anime history, and yes, I will absolutely glaze him later because he earned it. But because Vinland Saga takes what looks like a simple revenge story and transforms it into something much deeper. A story about pain, purpose, masculinity, war, fatherhood, slavery, emptiness, and what it actually means to become a true warrior. We're going to talk about Thorfinn, Askeladd, Canute, and why Season 2 is not a slow farming arc. It's the emotional heart of the entire series. Because Vinland Saga doesn't just ask who wins in battle. It asks a much harder question. How do you live after violence has shaped your entire soul? And that's where this story becomes unforgettable. Vinland Saga begins with Thorfinn as a child, living in Iceland with his family. And before the trauma train arrives at full speed, we meet his father Thors. Now Thors is one of those characters who barely gets any screen time compared to the rest of the cast. And yet his presence hangs over the entire story like a ghost. Because Thors is different. In a world obsessed with war, pride, and strength, Thors has already seen the truth. He used to be this legendary warrior, this absolute monster on the battlefield, but he walked away from all of it. Not because he became weak, but because he understood something the rest of the world didn't. That violence doesn't make you strong. That killing doesn't make you honorable. That being feared is not the same thing as being worthy. And then he gives us one of the most important ideas in the whole anime. A true warrior needs no sword. Which, let's be honest, sounds cool immediately. Like that line enters the room wearing a cape. But the genius of Vinland Saga is that it doesn't just drop that line to sound deep. The entire series is built around proving what that sentence actually means. Anyway, Thorfinn idolizes his father, because of course he does. Thors is calm, strong, respected, and basically has that anime dad aura where you just know something terrible is going to happen. And then it does. Thors is pulled back into war by forces tied to his old life. And Thorfinn secretly follows him because he's a child and children in anime have two modes, adorable and catastrophic. That decision changes everything, because this is where we meet Askeladd. And wow, what an unbelievable character. Askeladd is a mercenary leader, manipulative, intelligent, funny, ruthless, and somehow always looks like he's 10 steps ahead of everybody else in the room. He's the kind of character who can make you laugh, horrify you, and impress you all in the same scene. And he kills Thors, not in some glorious, fair, heroic duel, not in a way that gives Thorfinn closure, but through trickery, numbers, and the ugly reality of war. And that moment breaks Thorfinn, not just because his father dies, but because the entire world he believed in dies with him. From that point on, Thorfinn becomes consumed by revenge. He joins Askeladd's band, follows the man who killed his father, and spends years fighting in wars just for the chance to challenge him to a duel. Think about how insane that is. This kid hates Askeladd with every fiber of his being, and yet his entire life revolves around him. He fights for him, travels with him, learns from him, lives because of him. It's twisted, it's tragic, and it's exactly why Vinland Saga is so good. Because the story doesn't just give Thorfinn an enemy, it traps him in a relationship with the source of his pain. And while Thorfinn is out here collecting trauma like it's a side quest reward, the anime keeps expanding its world. We see England invaded by Danes. We see kings, politics, betrayal, survival. We meet Canute, who starts off looking like he'd apologize to a tree for bumping into it, and later becomes one of the coldest characters in the story. Seriously, Canute's transformation is one of the most shocking glow-ups in anime. This man goes from timid prince to I have seen the nature of the world and I am done playing nice in a way that feels completely earned. And in the middle of all this chaos, Askeladd keeps stealing every scene because he's not just a villain. That would be too simple. He's selfish, yes. Cruel, absolutely. but he's also deeply layered. He's carrying his own hatred, his own pride, his own buried ideals. He's a man who despises the world and knows how to survive in it. And maybe the craziest part is this. Askeladd understands Thorfinn better than Thorfinn understands himself. He knows the boy is being consumed. He knows revenge is chaining him down. He even mocks him for it constantly. And yet, in his own bizarre, messed up way, he becomes one of the most important figures in Thorfinn's life, which is kind of horrifying if you think about it too long. Because the man who destroyed Thorfinn's life also helps define it. Then comes one of the greatest turns in the story. As political tensions rise and Canute begins to awaken, Askeladd is forced into a final impossible situation. And in one of the most unforgettable moments in the series, he chooses to die on his own terms, not by Thorfinn's hand, not in the revenge duel Thorfinn spent years waiting for, but as a sacrifice, a final act, a chaotic move that protects what Askeladd actually cared about. And just like that, Thorfinn loses everything. Again, not just the chance for revenge, the purpose behind his entire existence. And this is where most stories would end. Hero fails, roll credits. But Vinland Saga does something far more interesting. It asks, what happens to a person when the hatred keeping them alive is suddenly gone? And the answer is brutal, because Thorfinn doesn't become free, he becomes empty. This is the twist that makes Vinland Saga special. The revenge story was never the destination, it was the trap. For an entire season, the anime lets you believe you're watching Thorfinn move toward his goal. Every duel, every battle, every act of violence feels like progress. But it's not progress, it's decay. Thorfinn isn't becoming stronger in any meaningful sense. He's becoming emptier, colder, smaller on the inside. The boy who once admired his father's kindness turns into someone who can barely function without rage. And when Askeladd dies, the story reveals the truth. Thorfinn never had a future. He only had a target. That's devastating. Because revenge gave him direction, but it never gave him a life. And Season 2 understands this better than most anime ever could. Instead of doubling down on hype and more revenge, Vinland Saga slows all the way down and forces us to sit in the consequences. No flashy revenge climax, no easy catharsis, no now he's the strongest and coolest guy ever. No, now we watch a broken man try to remember how to be human. That is such a bold choice. And yeah, I'm gonna say it, the people who drop Season 2 because nothing happens completely miss the point. Because everything happens, the action just moves inward. And honestly, that takes way more courage. Revenge as identity. The first big reason Vinland Saga works so well is because it understands revenge on a psychological level. A lot of stories treat revenge like fuel, something noble, something cool, something that gives the protagonist edge. Vinland Saga treats revenge like poison. Not dramatic anime poison where your veins glow purple or whatever. I mean real poison. The kind that keeps you alive just long enough to destroy everything inside you. Thorfinn's hatred for Askeladd becomes his identity. Without it, he doesn't know who he is. And that's terrifying because it's real. A lot of people build themselves around pain, around what was taken from them, around the one wound they can't stop touching. And as long as that pain gives them purpose, they never have to ask the harder question, who am I without this suffering? That's Thorfinn's real crisis. Not how do I kill Askeladd, but who am I if I no longer have someone to hate? Thor's and the meaning of strength. Then there's Thor's. Thor's is the moral center of Vinland Saga. Even after his death, everything comes back to him. In most Viking stories, strength means dominance, power, victory, the ability to kill your enemies and crush anyone in your way. Thor's rejects all of that. To him, true strength is restraint, mercy, the ability to endure violence without becoming violence. That sounds beautiful, also sounds impossible, and that's why it matters. Because Vinland Saga is not naive. It doesn't pretend pacifism is easy. It doesn't pretend kindness magically fixes the world. It shows how unbelievably difficult it is to refuse hatred in a world built on hatred. That's what makes Thor such a powerful character. He's not weak because he avoids violence. He's strong because he understands it completely and still chooses something better. That's a level of strength most characters never even approach. Askeladd, the greatest villain who isn't really a villain. Now let's talk about Askeladd. Because wow, this man is one of the best written characters in anime, period. What makes him so fascinating is that he constantly resists easy categorization. He's not a hero, not a simple villain, not an anti-hero in the lazy, edgy way people use that term. He's a survivor, a manipulator, a cynic, a performer, a man with deep contempt for the very people he leads. And underneath all of that, he carries real pain. His relationship with his mother, his hatred of the Danish world around him, his admiration for legends and kings, all of that gives him this strange duality. He can be absolutely monstrous one second, and then weirdly noble the next. You never fully relax around Askeladd. And that's what makes him magnetic. He's also crucial because he becomes a dark mirror to Thorfinn. Thorfinn thinks he's chasing justice, but in reality he's becoming attached to a man who embodies the ugliness of the world he hates. And here's the genius part. Askeladd ends up teaching Thorfinn more than almost anyone else. Not by being good, but by showing him exactly what kind of man he could become if he keeps living through hatred alone. Canute's arc is another major reason the series is so rich. At first, Canute seems fragile, almost irrelevant. You look at him and think, there is no way this guy survives Viking politics. And then Vinland Saga hits the switch. Canute's transformation is not just about confidence. It's about ideology. He sees the cruelty of the world and decides that if God's love won't save humanity, then he will create paradise himself through power. Which sounds noble for about 5 seconds until you realize what that actually means. Control, sacrifice, domination, imposing peace through force. Canute and Thorfinn end up representing two different responses to suffering. Canute says, "The world is cruel, so I will rule it." Thorfinn eventually says, "The world is cruel, so I refuse to add more cruelty." That contrast is incredible, because Vinland Saga never gives us easy answers. Both paths come from pain, both are responses to injustice, but only one of them tries to break the cycle instead of mastering it. And now we get to Season 2. The arc that separated the viewers who wanted noise from the viewers who wanted meaning. Season 2 is where Vinland Saga becomes a masterpiece. Why? Because it focuses on the hardest thing a story like this can do. Healing. Not revenge, not conquest. Not becoming overpowered. Healing. And healing is messy, slow, humiliating even. When we see Thorfinn in Season 2, he's not the feral little warrior from Season 1 anymore. He's numb, broken, a slave with no direction. And that's intentional, because once revenge is gone, all the damage finally has room to speak. The nightmares, the guilt, the dead, the realization that he's spent years becoming the very thing his father wanted him to escape. That scene where Thorfinn is forced to confront the weight of all the people he's killed, absolutely devastating. No dramatic speech can erase that. No cool fight can fix it. And then comes Einar. Einar is so important because he brings something into Thorfinn's life that has been missing for almost the entire series. Genuine human connection without violence. Their friendship is the emotional foundation of Season 2. Through labor, pain, honesty, and shared struggle, Thorfinn slowly starts to rebuild himself. And this is where the anime quietly does something extraordinary. It makes farming feel more revolutionary than war. Because growing something, protecting something, choosing not to harm, for a story born in bloodshed, that is radical. Season 2 says becoming a better man is harder than becoming a dangerous one. And honestly, that might be the most powerful message in the whole show. One of the smartest things Vinland Saga does is explore masculinity without turning into a lecture. This story is full of men raised in systems that worship power, violence, conquest, and pride. To be a man in this world means to dominate or be dominated. And Vinland Saga dismantles that idea piece by piece. Thors rejects it, Askeladd manipulates it, Canute weaponizes it, Thorfinn suffers under it. The series keeps asking, what is manhood if it isn't violence? What is strength if it isn't domination? What is honor if it isn't tied to war? And it answers through transformation, not speeches. A true man in Vinland Saga is not the one who can kill the most people. It's the one who can carry pain without passing it on. That's such a hard truth, and such a necessary one. Because anyone can throw a punch, not everyone can end a cycle. And finally, there's the idea of Vinland itself. Vinland is more than a place, it's a dream. A land without slavery, without endless war, without the cruelty that defines the world Thorfinn grew up in. Is it idealistic? Sure, maybe even impossible. But that's the point. Vinland represents the choice to imagine something better. And after everything this story shows us, the blood, the grief, the betrayal, the emptiness, the fact that it still dares to believe in a better world feels almost rebellious. That's what makes the title so important. This isn't just a saga about Vikings. It's a saga about whether human beings can move beyond violence. That's a much bigger story. So no, Vinland Saga is not just a revenge anime. It starts there, yes. It uses the language of revenge, war, and power to pull you in. But then it does something much rarer. It grows up. It takes all the things that usually make stories like this exciting, rage, vengeance, violence, glory, and asks whether any of them actually lead to peace. And its answer is brutal but honest. Revenge won't heal you. Violence won't complete you. Hatred won't give your life meaning. At best, those things will give you a direction. At worst, they'll take your soul and leave you with nothing. What makes Vinland Saga truly special is that it doesn't stop at destruction. It believes rebuilding matters too. It believes a broken person can change, that a violent person can choose peace, that strength can look like mercy, that real courage might mean putting down the sword instead of raising it. And in a genre where so many characters are told to fight harder, scream louder, and become stronger, Vinland Saga dares to ask something much more difficult. What if the real challenge is learning how not to hurt people anymore? That's why this story stays with people. Because beneath the Vikings, the politics, the battles, and the pain, Vinland Saga is about becoming human in a world that keeps rewarding inhumanity. And honestly, that's not just great anime, that's great storytelling.